Hola persona que me estás viendo desde Finlandia, persona que me estás viendo desde Filistea, persona que me estás viendo desde Philip Morris. Mi nombre es Nachito y vamos a seguir en esta masterclass de diseño con este héroe del desarrollo de juegos indies que es para mí al menos Jonathan Blow. Estamos en el mundo no sé cuánto, en el nivel no sé cuánto del mundo 3. Debemos estar como por la mitad del mundo 3. Vamos allá.
This is the longest stage in the game. Tim runs for quite a while here. From the beginning to the end, you see more and more of these unusual, weird plants until they're totally covering the ground. You might miss it at first because there's so much around you to distract you. I mean, first of all, you're being attacked by vicious rabbits, and then you've got the cannons to contend with.
Conejos que suenan como gatitos, además,
Meanwhile, in the
por alguna
background,
razón.
you are treated to this view of the distant hills and like the ominous clouds gathering overhead. Between the SD and HD versions here, there's a lot more detail in the clouds. They're kind of complex in their structure, actually, and they're composed of particle effects and everything. Combination of different types of things with variance across the sky.
Seems like the rain effect is getting more increased on this area as well, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of rain, and in fact, there's a second type of rain, which is kind of a big falling sheet.
Súper complejas esas nubes. Fíjate que también están rotando. Este nivel también recuerdo que tuve que volver más tarde para poder completarlo.
Oh, right. Yes. This first part is just using rewind in a clever way. It's, again, save the monster, but now save the monster using rewind because we have to jump on the monster.
Yeah. This is one of these interesting places where you run up into design constraints of the game a little bit because, I didn't have a dynamic camera in the game. Like, the camera doesn't zoom out or in or anything like that. And I wanted to keep it simple. And also, that would have been more programming to do. And the game was already a lot of work, right? But in order for this puzzle to be not randomly solvable, it has to be kind of long, this period. Because otherwise, you, in the process of running around and rewinding and stuff, if you just happen to rewind correctly, you might accidentally brute force the puzzle. And in fact, with smaller versions of this, I did do that sometimes.
So it needs to be like at least 2 cannonball wavelengths long.
Yeah, something like that. And the thing is, it's almost wider than the screen, the entire distance that
and you need to be over there by the time this happens. So yeah, it's
actually kind of challenging for that reason. And it's a little bit ergonomically unfriendly while you're figuring it out. But then eventually, there's a pretty straightforward solution. Like what I just did there was, I'll save the monster, but wait, he's over there. What did I need him for again? I was just trying to save him. And then by the time I get over there, I'm like, maybe he'll bounce off a wall. No, he jumps off the platform into the spikes, right? And so you just hang out here for a while, right? And then you go do the thing. You go left where you can see the monster. And so I turned this thing that was awkward, the length of it, into an asset in the sense that
you realize you can do this as you move.
Well, it becomes a little bit tactical of like, I can't see the monster where I need to be. So let me go to where I can see the monster, right? It becomes just a little bit more deliberate.
I think, honestly, when I played this, I think I was willing to try a couple times until I got the timing of what was happening off camera. And, but yeah, that's probably because I just stood there.
So you cheated at the game is what you're saying.
What? I did not cheat. No. I learned.
The parameters of this puzzle are somewhat precarious. If the fireballs are too close together or move too quickly, it could become too difficult for the player to prevent the monster from being killed because the required timing is too tight and too tweaky. In a puzzle game like this, it could be very bad for basic playability if the player tries the right thing, the actual intended solution to the puzzle, but he fails because of tweakiness factors. When this happens, he might conclude that he's not trying the right approach and instead go try other things that are totally wrong and put him off on the wrong track for a long time. Also, hey, it is just less fun to try to solve a very spammy puzzle. So, we want the fireballs to be kind of slow and far apart. But if the fireballs are slow and far apart, it's easier for the player to solve the puzzle accidentally, because the windows for the monster to inhabit are so big that accidental rewinds can get the monster out. That's why this upper platform is so long. We're minimizing the chances of an accidental solve. This causes the platform to extend off the screen to the left, and you have to start the solution by standing near the puzzle piece where you can't see the cannon and monster. But I actually liked the off-screen aspect of this puzzle in this case. It's one of the rare exceptions where we want you to reason about stuff that's off-screen, the other major ones being movement by degrees, movement amplified, and World 5's lair. Initially, the player is likely to be just focused on getting the monster through the fireballs. When he finally does this, he's unlikely to end up in a place where he can bounce off the monster to get the puzzle piece. But getting the monster through the fireballs confirms without a doubt that the player has executed a major portion of the solution, and he can then work on a version 2 solution that ends with him in the right place. This kind of partial solvability is a good property for a puzzle to have. It helps players know when they're making progress, and it helps them feel good about that progress because they can fit it into a mental framework along with where they've been and where they're trying to go. Sometimes, puzzles can feel unfun and unfair when there's no way to get traction on them with a partial solve. At the same time, though, sometimes I do deliberately design puzzles that way, such as the high jump puzzle. And there's another example of partial solvability over here.
So, the mimics, these pink rabbits that jump around and attack you. These sounds were some of the sounds that we originally felt
Mimics se llaman.
sounded quite off aesthetically. Part of them sounded too familiar, like house cats meowing, rather than strange and lethal pink rabbits. And other parts sounded very strangely distorted and bad in terms of technical quality. So, we needed to redo all of these sounds for different reasons and in different ways. It is quite challenging to design an animal that sounds cute and nice while it jumps happily around and even when it dies, but at the same time sound vicious and cruel when it attacks. And still make it sound like it comes from the same tiny creature, and also sound familiar to the players who know the original sounds. We wanted to move away from all references to house cats, but to keep the size and pitch and feel of this animal. One of the original sounds had this cuteness combined with a gritty and grating hiss texture. It sounded like this. So this sound sounded both cute and cruel at the same time, so we wanted to try to add that spice to all the sounds, to make them connect better together and come from the same animal. In order to do that, we tried a lot of different ways to distort the original sounds, which all didn't work out very well. So what we ended up doing was the good old deflate a balloon into the mouth sound. We recorded a ton of this. And then we played it back in double tempo, like this. And this gritty high-pitch texture you hear was then actually added to all the new mimic sounds we made. In the end, it turned out to become a giant patchwork of restored original sounds and completely new sounds based on different monkey recordings actually. Some of them imitating the originals and others replacing the cat sounds with something completely different. But all of these new sounds have this added balloon texture underneath. I mentioned earlier that we wanted to have the mimics not sound like house cats, which they obviously do now. And that's because right in the end, right before deadline, John decided that we'd gone too far away from the original braid vibe or feel in this sound the mimics make when they leap towards you. And that by removing the cat sounds completely, we'd actually removed an important thing about the game. Actually, this has been a great challenge throughout the process, this balance between making a new and improved game that sounds great for first-timers but still make it sound familiar to those who know the original. And especially this mimic leap sound has been through many, many iterations and was, as you can hear, even changed right before launch. So anyway, the original game had these two leap sounds playing. And I actually simply reused them and blended them together with the balloon sounds I just mentioned. But of course, the original problem with only having two variations of this sound still persisted. So I dived through literally hundreds of cat recordings to find some that had that same kind of cat language, because when you're chased around by a single mimic, it just doesn't seem believable if it talks with different voices each time it jumps, which I think is a problem in the original game. So, we needed more cats. One might think that a cat just sounds like a cat, but it turns out they have very different voices, and when you start to compare them side by side with the braid sounds, they just don't sound very alike. I did, however, find a handful of single meows that were close enough in language and tone and voice, and I then pitched and stretched and equalized and manipulated them to make them match the two originals. But not match too much, because we also want the variation, so that's really a delicate balance. So this is how the mimics sounded before they were changed a month before launch. And here are the two new leap sounds that are based on the originals and the balloons. And these are then some of the new imitations that are constructed. They all sound kind of distorted, which is because of the balloon sound. But I think that's actually part of why they sound more vicious than just cats. And I also think it gives this undefinable braid vibe the original leap sounds had.
Now let's deal with there's the herd of bunnies. I find the bunnies very frightening, by the way.
Is it the visuals? Are they too cute, or is it the sound?
I mean, well, many cute things are intrinsically alarming, but I just, they're relentless. They're relentless. Yeah. The yowling is terrible. I find them disturbing on many levels. Right. So this is the point where we alter the phase between those two cannons to cause a collision which wasn't happening in the initial state of the world, and that divides the frequency in two. And it's nice because the first thing you do is you just run through all this and you're like, whew, I survived. And then you get over to these platforms on the right. And again, you have the platform think. You think, oh, maybe if I run fast enough and get the timing just right, maybe I can get in between those. And maybe you try a couple of times. And if the frequency were just a little bit slower, maybe there would be a solution that involved totally twitchy, perfect timing. But instead you're like, wait, it's not that kind of game.
Yeah. And if the cannon fires too slowly, right, you don't really need to solve the puzzle. Even if the timing were tweaky, you could just get up this ladder and through this hallway, right? You need that to be clearly not solvable in the default state here, right? And so, of course, the solution is to do this thing that some players have happened by accident, which is fine, right? Because then you still need to figure out what to do with it and or not to spoil it with rewind. Although a small percentage of players just luckily get this and all the bunnies are dead, so they don't really rewind. And then there's no puzzle at the end for those people. But that happens relatively rarely, right?
Sure.
Okay, so the other end of the tuning I just mentioned is this wide interval has to be wide enough that even if you're not good at the Twitch platform skills, you can pretty easily get up the ladder and over, right? Because otherwise, well, that would be very frustrating because now I got hit by the thing and I'm dead. I have to rewind and I've messed up the synchronization. Right. And I have to go back there and do it. And the good part of the puzzle is seeing this happen, seeing the things hit, right? And then you're like, oh. And it could be that people just don't have the idea to try this and it doesn't happen serendipitously here. But there's a few other occasions in the game where it could happen. And so over the course of a playthrough, people probably see it at some point, right?
Me pregunto si habrá hecho trampa Jonathan y hacer que si vos rebobinás en la primera parte del nivel, este cañón no se rebobine. ¿Por qué? Porque de esa manera no se arriesga a que esta solución se encuentre de forma accidental. ¿Qué pasa si por todos los rewinds que estuve haciendo antes, cuando llego hasta el final del nivel, esta fase justo por casualidad coincide? Conociéndolo a Jonathan, para mí que hizo trampa. El señor no corre riesgos. Bien, ¿qué había que hacer acá?
I had to try this many, many times actually before I got the point. It's like all these things are killing me and trying to kill me, and so I rewind a little bit, so I'm alive again, and I get over there, and darn it, the platform is blocked, and what am I going to do? And you realize you have to get up there evading the yowling rabbits and trolls without once using rewind. And again, I like this because at first rewind seems like this infinite superpower. You can always undie anytime you want. You can always undo anything. It's like, well, no, not quite. Sometimes rewinding has costs. Sometimes it doesn't return the world to the state you intended. And I really like that.
I'm glad you think so. Some people get really mad at this, not like mad, but I have a friend who's also a game designer who was like, I don't like this level because it's the first time rewind can actually cause you to fail the game, whereas before it was a way of not failing the game, right?
Well, exactly.
And I was like, well, but that's the point. That's what we're doing is we're touring.
That's a feature, not a bug.
Yeah, I'm glad you agree with me. Now, do you want to? Okay, so when I first conceived this level, it was just like you're describing. Like there's a gauntlet of threats, and you've got to run that gauntlet in a platformer way. And if you mess up, then like you could maybe get a tiny mess up and still make it, but other than that, you know, you probably have to retry.
Okay.
You could also do the following thing. You just hang out by the entrance. There's more monsters over there, but you don't really need to care about that right now. So you just hang out by the entrance. And then once this platform is over the other one,
right,
then all you have to do is not rewind till they overlap in the wrong way, right?
Right.
So now I can rewind.
Now you have some wiggle
So
room.
like, it's a little bit hard because
the platform has to be not so far to the left that the monsters are falling in. And yeah.
No vamos a hacer eso porque eso es para cobardes. Vamos a hacerlo bien. Para hacerlo bien, bueno, ya está sucediendo bien, pero vamos a reiniciar el nivel y hacer el platforming. Y como me gusta mucho la frase "It's a feature, not a bug", capaz ese sea el título de este video. ¡Ay! Déjame de joder. Una sola vez rebobiné. Eres duro pero justo, Jonathan Blow. Ya la cagué. Bueno, ahora puedo esperar acá. Tuki. Continuemos.
There are two parts to the level. There's an above ground part and a below ground part, and they're pretty much separate.
Okay.
So you go to the below ground part, and there's a key that's pretty easy to get.
Right.
And then there are two gates, and you have one key and two gates, and
Right.
you might think, oh, I need to go look for the other key, but
Right.
there's no other key on the level. And so you hopefully learn that you can open two gates with one key by, judicious use of your abilities.
Right.
It's not that hard of a puzzle. In fact, you could solve that one accidentally because it's so simple.
Right. And the way that works out is because there are marked, like some of the elements are marked rewind exempt, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then there's a harder puzzle right below that is a similar situation, but with three gates.
Okay.
And so there's a bit of a progression there.
I see.
Okay, you get this. Do you get this, which is a more complex version of the same thing.
Right.
But it's certainly not asking you to do the same thing twice.
Right. It's asking you to do a similar thing.
Yes. I mean, the same thing a bunch of times just turns into like Towers of Hanoi or whatever,
Yes,
which is one
yes.
of the most
Yes.
annoying so-called puzzles in the universe.
Yes.
I mean, it's fine, 2,000 years ago or whenever it was invented for like manipulating blocks because that's kind of fun, but it's not so fine in a modern video game. And this is a canon that has absolutely no purpose, really.
Yeah. I know. It's okay.
It's one of those things, we didn't remove it from the revised version of the game because it's there and we don't want to wreck the game and make it something that it wasn't. But it really was here to just add a little bit more tension to the level or
a
something.
frisson of danger.
And both that and the bunny there and the guy at the bottom here that like even I still always die to this day. They could all go and it would be fine,
But it's okay. I mean, so there are games where every single object, every single feature of the architecture is a puzzle element. And, I think at this point, the player understands that that's true of almost everything, but I think it's okay. It's not true of everything. It's okay to have some decoration, decorations that kill you.
Yeah. Decorations kill you the best kind, man.
Me parece, de hecho, una buena decisión que haya cosas que no cumplen ningún propósito. Está bien, le agregan un poco de lo que hubiéramos llamado dificultad artificial, que tengas que esquivar conejitos. Pero no es realmente difícil porque puedes retroceder el tiempo inmediatamente. O sea que no es que esté intentando inflar artificialmente la dificultad, sino agregando un poco de tensión, diría. Y como él dice, podría ser completamente prescindible. Pero digo que me parece una buena decisión porque me parece que le agrega un cierto nivel de encanto a los juegos cuando hay decisiones arbitrarias. ¿Por qué son 6 conejitos y no 5? ¿Y por qué uno de los conejitos es celeste? No sé, te va a decir Jonathan. Pintó. Me gustó. Y es una razón tan válida como cualquier otra, mientras que no esté restando a otro elemento del juego. Por ejemplo, siempre y cuando no sea confuso. Por ejemplo, acá al no haber ninguna pieza, no hay chance de que este cañón o los enemigos que te aparecen acá te den a vos la idea de que vas a necesitar esto para resolver un puzzle. No resta, no es confuso, porque las piezas de puzzle ya quedaron allá. Con lo cual, genial, le agrega encanto al juego. Vamos a armar esto con lo que tenemos.
So then there's this underground puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
So here we have rewinding keys and non-rewinding keys and rewinding locks and non-rewinding locks. And the first puzzle is, okay, you know, I get it. I have a rewindable key and a non-rewindable lock, and that means I get to use the key twice. That's really cool, right? And then you go down here and you're like, oh, there's a good old-fashioned rewindable key, and okay, so should I do the same thing? And okay, let's do that. Again, the greedy strategy. And that seems fine. And okay, well, there must be another key down here. And we go down there. And okay, great. This is easy. No problem. I know exactly what to do. And then you go back over here and you're like, great, I need to rewind to do that again. And wait, oh, darn. That key isn't rewindable. I didn't get it back. It's not infinitely hard, this puzzle, but again, you have to turn things around a little bit in your mind. Remember how I said before, oh, like the sparkly greenish gold key, that's the super wonderful key because you can get it out of pits. But actually here we realize, oh, that's not always the more useful, more powerful key because you can't get it back. So the things that are immune are also the things that you can't get back. And that was really interesting to me. And we'll say more about that on the next level.
Yeah. One more thing to say about this one. When I first designed it, right, the idea to do, well, it's much like the level phase or a few other levels where we have a simpler version of a problem that's not supposed to be that hard.
Right.
It's supposed to be cool and introduce you to the idea and just show this new phenomenon, right?
Right.
So we have the easier version and then the harder version. It's got one extra gate, one extra key. Maybe you don't even notice the extra key at first, right? Because it's way off down in the pit. And I arrived at this, I think, a little bit by trial and error. I was like, what can I do that's like harder and stuff? And then after I made it, I realized the harder puzzle is reducible to the simpler puzzle after one move. But almost
right
nobody
first
ever
move.
premeditates. Yes.
Yeah.
And the right first move okay. You know, there's misdirection here in the sense that we give you the wrong key first, and obviously, and in fact, when I give you the wrong key, you haven't even seen the other key. But usually people are just going to start making progress on the puzzle. So they open the first gate that they can use with the key that they can see, and then they start looking around, like what's down the ladder. Oh, there's another key. Great, right? And so it's set up to encourage people to do it wrong. And I mean, maybe through some freak chance, some very small number of people do this right the first time, but I doubt it, right? It's one of these things in the game where we really encourage you to get here and get stuck, right? And then look at the thing and say, wait, there's more gates than keys.
Yeah. I was stuck here for a long time. I was like making up theorems and proofs. Like I can prove that this puzzle is impossible because this key can only get through that gate. And then, but if I try to get the key back, I close that gate again, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, in the end, the solution is it's not like a ton of moves or something, but it is a deliberately non-intuitive order. You know, of course, in principle, you could make if you have a rewindable key, you could go through as many sparkly gates as you wanted. And you could probably make diabolical combinatorial puzzles with like sets of keys and sequences of gates and
Diabolico.
God only knows what. And it's probably NP complete and so on. But, you know, this was a very nice taste of you sometimes have to follow a different branch than the one that made the most sense at first.
Yeah. And I do think like this is very clearly something that this game doesn't do, what you just mentioned about making ever more complex, piled up puzzles.
Right. They don't get bigger, which is, I think that's good because some puzzle games, they just get bigger.
Well, I think, you know, what the game is after is to communicate the ideas, right? And after this second one, that was all the cool idea that I had at the time as the designer of this. And after that's done being communicated, like giving you more puzzles is not necessarily like that's filler, right? But it's not really good, right? And so while making this game, I started to learn this aesthetic that it's not exactly a minimalist aesthetic. I think that's the wrong word, but it's right sizing things, right? It's like what's interesting, focus on that.
And then avoid the bunnies.
Qué bien escucharlo decir que está evitando los fillers. 'Cause it's the filler night. F final. Donde aparentemente, por lo que escuchamos hace un par de episodios, se descartó un redibujo mucho más agresivo de todo esto. En favor de, sencillamente, subir la calidad de la idea que ya había.
So here's our first layer. And so I have to admit, in standard video games, I hate the boss levels. I would much rather mow down large mobs of small to medium-sized baddies. I just never really enjoyed the whole thing of having to carefully memorize, okay, he's charging up his lightning bolt, I have to dodge this way, and then I have to switch weapons because I can hit him in the left mandible, which is vulnerable for 3 seconds, and it's not really what I enjoy. So the first time I played the game, I got here, I was like, oh, Christ, a boss level. Ugh. But this is almost a parody of boss levels, right? Yeah. First of all, you can rewind, and so you can undie. That's nice. So, if he hits you, whatever. But of course, there's this other nice thing going on, which gets back to what I said before about the magic immune key is the one that I can't get back. He looks magical and powerful and scary. He's sparkly. He has the green and gold glow. But I'm not stuck in here with him. He is stuck in here with me, precisely because he's immune to rewind. I can go back and bonk him again and again and again, and he does not get healed. In fact, it's fun to even, if you time it right, drop the chandelier on him multiple times in the same fall and just go up, down, up, down, up, down, and get a couple of hits off him. So, okay, he's designed to be scary. He makes noise. He jumps around. The world shakes at his footfall. But actually, once you know what's going on, you're in total control. His sparkliness turns out to make him less powerful than you are.
I actually wanted to talk a bit about expressionism in sound, because the graphics of Braid is like a living painting in an art style that you could call expressionism. And we wanted the whole game to be in an audio style that matched that, a sort of expressionist audio. But there is not much sound in visual art history, so we had to make that up. What we mean by expressionism is that the sound should express a feeling rather than sound realistic. Or you could also say that we wanted the audio to sound like it was painted rather than realistic or photographed. A good example of this approach is here in the boss level in World 3.7. The original boss sounds all had this metallic robot ring to them that was probably due to too much time stretching, or we don't know actually, but it sounded like this. But this robot texture seemed a bit wrong with respect to the graphics. So we wanted to redesign the boss and make it sound much more organic and less digital. The expressionist approach dictated that we should not make it sound like a realistic monster, if you could say that, or an animal, but rather express that in an hand-painted way. But how to paint a sound? You cannot really just take a brush and start painting. But luckily the solution here seemed obvious, because earlier on I had been playing a lot with making monster growls by scratching my nail against different cardboard boxes of different sizes. It sounds like this. I'm actually just scratching my nail over the box. So this technique actually made it possible to more or less draw the same sounds or perform them, the same sounds as we hear in the game. Although this seemed to fit the idea of expressionist monster sounds perfectly, we also wanted to stay true to the original wobbly robot feel, and this was too far away from that. So I added a simple tremolo effect to the cardboard growls. But I also kept the originals playing underneath to hint that same tone. And then I also actually stumbled upon some great walrus sounds that reminded me of so much of the Braid boss, so I simply had to use them. And then by adding this same tremolo effect to these walrus grunts, I could make them blend seamlessly with the cardboard growls, so it all played together as one sound. We used that same hand paint approach in the design of all the sounds throughout the game. Maybe not as obvious as here, where the sounds are actually performed by hand, but in the sense that the sounds should not sound realistic, but rather convey a feeling. In general, the idea of making the sounds hand-painted by brush is often done by making simplistic but full, frequent and colorful sound effects, and then using various analog audio equipment to blur the edges and give that organic feel. It's funny how it's hard to describe these things without using picture metaphors all the time.
Difícil o imposible. Para mí no es un problema porque tengo un cerebro sinestésico. Vos me hablás de imágenes y lo puedo correlacionar con sonidos y viceversa. Pero me encantó toda esa reflexión acerca de cómo es un expresionismo en la música, o tal vez diríamos en el sound design. Porque el expresionismo siempre tiene esa tensión entre ser figurativo y ser, no sé si diría abstracto, pero ser pictórico, ¿no? Esto que acaba de decir, el núcleo del expresionismo como corriente artística es que lo figurativo está en segundo plano y lo primero es la percepción, la sensación que te da. Si vas a pintar un día soleado, todos los colores van a ser más vibrantes, y no porque en la realidad lo sean, sino porque estés intentando capturar la esencia de cómo se siente a los sentidos un día soleado. ¿Correcto? Bueno, eso sería la esencia del expresionismo. Sigamos. Escuchemos un poco los sonidos. Es increíble la evolución, cuando le prestas atención. Presta atención a los sonidos. Al antes y al después. A casa, pete.
So this character you fight a couple times. He's the the only thing that's quite like a boss character. Edmund's version was a brown furry creature, maybe related to the kind of standard monsters. And I tried some different concepts that went in different directions, like more of a goblin type creature or a dog or other things. I guess it did end up to be a kind of dog. So he's got like a dog snout and a furry face. I don't know. I think it's just a combination of like something familiar that's sort of blown out of proportion. Like, I don't know, does Tim have a dog? I'm not sure, but this is something that could have come from the real world, but he's wearing this fanciful armor and stomping around. It was fun to build this creature out of multiple parts and kind of plan out the animations and how each part would function.
Something else that comes to mind is the quite a bit of new contrast with the chandeliers.
We increased the contrast a lot here. The chandeliers are green instead of brown. I mean, I think that was always a pretty poor choice that they'd be brown. Makes them look very like the trellis that you're on. I've also added some shadows behind the foreground, sort of separating the ceiling from the trellis. So the scene just reads better.
Do you have any story interpretation of what these bosses are, or are they just bosses?
That's a good question. I don't know if I have like a developed idea of what these bosses are. I think it's just kind of the stock idea of a boss or like a creature living down here in the lair. I don't know if it has a lot more resonance. Maybe if you run back to the center, we can look at his home.
Yeah, there's like a table with maybe some bowls or like a tea service or something, right? And a suit of armor kind of reflecting the castle theme, I guess. Maybe is that a shield?
Yeah, that looks like a shield. I guess the big table kind of implies like a feasting. So
you think he prepares and sits down to dine on his victims?
I think so. I think he savors it.
And he collects antique armor.
Yeah. And hero shields.
No es mi gusto particular este tipo de arbitrariedad. Cuando yo diseño algo, por ejemplo, no es que no permito la arbitrariedad. Si dije, bueno, el jefe va a parecer un perrito peludo, bueno, genial. Pero después, aunque sea en mi mente, casi siempre, solo en mi mente, trato de encontrar un lore, una justificación narrativa de por qué es un perrito. Sí, eso, no me gusta la arbitrariedad completa. Porque también me gusta sentir, cuando consumo arte, cuando consumo alguna pieza narrativa, me gusta sentir que el autor sabe lo que está haciendo aunque no lo diga y aunque no lo vaya a decir jamás. Al estilo David Lynch, por ejemplo, que es una gran influencia para mí, ¿no? Un montón de cosas se sienten arbitrarias cuando consumís algo de David Lynch. Y no me refiero solo a narrativa, hay tomas, hay direcciones en cómo enuncian los personajes que vos decís, ¿es dadaísmo esto? ¿Está siendo surrealista? ¿Está siendo absurdista? ¿Es gratuito esto o lo hace por una razón? Y un poco lo que él busca es darte la sensación de que sí, que hay una razón. No la vas a saber en tu puta vida. Porque valora más tu interpretación. Pero sí hay una razón. ¿Esto lo escuchamos? No.
And I'm curious how you decided to do a boss.
Honestly, so the boss idea, like sometimes you're just making a game and you're like, hell yeah, wouldn't it be cool to do a platformer boss? I've never done that. So the name of that guy in the code is called Gun Boss because he was going to be holding like a really big gun, right? Now he just spits fireballs out because I didn't want to think about like aiming a big thing around.
Oh yeah,
I didn't
weird
need that
in 2D. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. And then it just sort of turned into what it became because it was like, okay, how do I make this interesting? Rewind is sort of the player's strength, and rewind exemption is sort of it could be a weakness of the monster. Like it naturally is that. Like, oh, he can't get his hit points back. Like what? Okay. Like you could think of other ways to do a boss. Like maybe there's someone who could rewind also or something. But then that gets into like heavily scripted, weird gameplay. And I wanted something that was just like a phenomenon, right? So the basic phenomenon of rewindability is like, okay, if you have a counter on something, that counter will not reverse. So if it's hit points, it just goes down and never up. And it's weird because like that's actually how most games are already. But in this game, it's interesting because it wouldn't have been that way unless we made it that way. Like it's very strange because if I just have exactly this level in a game that didn't have rewind, it's not an interesting level. Now, of course, in order to do that, it's like, okay, you would have to have more ammo to hit the boss with, right? So that's the other thing that's interesting is there's 2 chandeliers. The chandeliers, by the way, why are they chandeliers? Because I felt like I wanted in the game to at least do, there's the whole thing about entropy going in one direction and things, come apart and don't go together very easily. And I wanted just like a visual of that in the game because I wouldn't feel like the game explored this very well without that. But I like the idea of having something break apart and come together. And so it gives us something to call back to at the end of the game. Then, of course, it's like, okay, well, it's not only the boss's weakness, but it's like, it's also how you get more ammunition to fight the boss is by using rewind. So it's not exactly a level that you could do in another game, right? But it's just the boss's hit points being irreversible is interesting, even though it totally isn't in every other game in the world. And I don't know, that was fun.
Sí, y también porque si ya existe el motor que te permite rebobinar partículas, rebobinar entidades, está bueno sacarlo a pasear un poquito a ese motor. Y qué mejor manera de sacar a pasear un motor que haciendo pelota a un candelabro.
This level involves a few different time-based constraints that all influence each other, so it's a good example of the kind of thought that goes into balancing distances and timings. The fundamental idea of the rightmost puzzle piece is that the player can't possibly reach it before the wall closes, so he has to do something crazy to get it. But the player doesn't yet know that that's the idea. When he first enters the level, he's just playing the game, trying to get the puzzle pieces straightforwardly. We want him to be able to run over to the area near the locked gate and see the falling wall, still mostly open but falling quickly. We want the player to feel like he might have a chance to race fast enough to unlock the gate and get the puzzle piece. It takes 5 or 6 seconds to get over there from the start of the level, so we want this wall to take a lot more than 6 seconds to close. But whereas we want him to think he might be able to get through the gate in time and to try a little bit, we actually want this to be impossible. To make it impossible, we make the player travel a long distance to get the key up and around and back. We taunt the player by putting the key near the entrance, and the monster picking up the key makes a sound cue that may alert the player to the presence of the key, which mitigates the camouflage due to the key somewhat blending into the background colors. We could have made the key a different color, but maybe the player would think it behaves differently from other keys he's seen. When designing this originally, I didn't want that confusion. In this game, the keys always look the same because they always behave the same. They just have different time effects applied. Was this refusal to recolor the key good design, or was it just me being over-concerned about something small? Often it's hard to tell the difference. Anyway, if the player can grab the key and open the gate before the wall is closed, that wrecks our puzzle, so we have to prevent him from doing that. We could make the wall close faster, or we could make the path he must travel longer. Here, I made the path to the key a bit convoluted, but I also added the constraint that he must pull the lever to move the platform, and doing both of these things takes quite a while. If the player ignores the lever and just goes immediately to the key and then the gate, we time the wall so that it shuts right about the time he gets there, which is good dramatic timing and also indicates that he probably can't get there in time. But he'll also figure out he needs the platform to stand on, and by the time he also pulls the lever, it will be overwhelmingly obvious this is all just too slow. But this is fine because he made progress. He can at least open the gate and go explore the right half of the level, even though the wall is shut and he can't get the puzzle piece now. There are some tricks you can do on this level. Because the lever is sparkling green, you can go down, wait to stomp on the monster, pull the lever, and then rewind quickly back up to the top of the first ladder, then continue over to get the key. The timing of the wall is such that even if you do all this very efficiently, it will slam into the floor right when you finally get to it, indicating that you're at least several seconds too late. But because you can do this rewind trick, the little maze leading to the switch has to be longer than it would otherwise be to ensure that the travel time in only the direction toward the switch is sufficiently long so that expert players cannot break the puzzle. We want the player to struggle a little bit and to try to get through the gate in a straightforward way, because when he sees clearly that the straightforward solution doesn't work, it makes the actual solution, which is wacky, seem more necessary and a lot cooler. There was something that was impossible, this wall comes down far too fast, and the strange time effect helps him do the impossible. On the right-hand side of the level, we have a sparkling platform that permits the player to rewind to the start of the level, but change his starting position. The idea is that he's now close enough to the key that it's possible to get it, but it shouldn't be easy, so he must run a gauntlet of obstacles. When building this level, I wanted to create the experience of rewinding at a very fast speed, with all these cannonballs and monsters flying by extremely quickly. I wanted the travel back to the puzzle piece to be a bit hectic, dodging a bunch of stuff, but without adding too many cannons to the level. This is why the cannonballs fly upward through the spikes, so that you have to dodge them twice. But there's a fortuitous timing. The cannonballs collide and destroy each other every 14th shot of the rightmost cannon, and the phase is set up so that this is the 6th shot after you rewind back to the beginning of the level. Which means, if you are running back to the puzzle piece and doing it somewhat efficiently, such that you hit the right timing, this 6th shot will happen right when you are climbing across the spike pit, helping you out a little bit. It takes about 13 seconds to get from the sparkling platform to the puzzle piece, so the wall has to close more slowly than 13 seconds. But if it closes a lot more slowly, maybe you didn't have to frantically dodge the gauntlet. And if it were to close tremendously more slowly, again, this would allow the player to skip the whole right half of the puzzle because he could just get to it from the beginning of the level. So I tuned it so that it's about 16 seconds before you can no longer get into where the puzzle piece is. You have something like 3 seconds of slack between when you could get in and when you must get in. That's not a long time, all things considered, but I wanted to tune this to be an action-y puzzle that you need to perform somewhat efficiently.
The upgrade here is all about improving the organization of space. Since you're moving between these different compartments, I like the idea of just differentiating them visually. It enhances that, there's a contrast. You're going from underground to above ground and back again, which just makes those transitions more interesting. There's also, in the middle of the stage, there's that area with the ladder and the tree and the gate, cobbled together in the old version and not very elegant or united. So in the new art, it was a chance to make it really feel like a tree, like a hollow tree with roots going down. And I feel it hangs together a lot better. So to me, that's was kind of crying out for improvement.
By the way, here's one of the places where I mentioned that it's possible to see cannonballs hit each other. Here, they're tuned so that they hit each other like every 7 or 8. I forget.
Right, because the frequency is a little bit different. It's
Yeah,
like a
it's like
beat,
every
it's like
10
a
or
beat
something.
frequency.
Yeah.
Right, when we have these two frequencies that are slightly different.
But so you're basically guaranteed to see that in the course of solving this level. Now, whether you pay attention to it, who knows? Because there's a lot of stuff happening. There's
So you're saying
monsters following and all
some
that.
people might see that, and even without having solved the previous puzzle.
Yeah, it's a way, it's like if you haven't ever thought of the idea that two of these things colliding might destroy them or interfere with them, because maybe they just pass through each other. Who knows? It's a video game. right? And so this is a demonstration of what happens. And maybe that helps things click. And even if it doesn't help it consciously click, like even if you don't go, oh, let me go use that in the other place, it maybe percolates a little bit over time.
I see.
Yeah.
So if people gave up on that prior puzzle and walked right through, then this would suggest something that they could go back.
Yeah, because they might, if you don't have the idea of stopping the bullets, it just looks unsolvable. Again,
Right.
You're like, the only thing you might think is maybe there's a bunch of rabbits here and maybe I'm supposed to bounce off a bunch of them and get up, but you can't actually do that, right? I hope not. This was one of those, so sometimes I design top down in that, like, I have the idea and how do I make the idea happen, right? And sometimes I design bottom up, which is like, let me just explore the world of the level and see what happens and see what's interesting about that, and then figure out how to compose those things into bigger experiences. And this was very definitely a top-down idea, not a bottom-up one. It was like, what are the high concept things I could do with rewind? Maybe you have to rewind a really long time and maybe really fast. I don't know if the fast thing came initially, or I think I added the rewind speed multiplier specifically for this puzzle because I was like, it'll be cool to see things, because you've seen like time-lapse films or whatever where things, you just expose it.
And you hear the music play fast and backwards, which sounds really fun.
Yeah. And so this was a moment that I wanted to create in the game. And how do I make an actual puzzle out of it, right? And so you have to sort of make a little bit of an out-of-the-box connection that, like, oh yeah, I can still barely see this puzzle piece on the left-hand side, which is deliberate again, right? It's like, it's not right above you. Once you come off this platform, now we have a little bit of a gauntlet that you have to run again.
I think
okay, so this one is a little bit different in a couple ways. One is if you mess up, you can rewind and you don't take a penalty because that door is also rewindable, right?
Right.
So it's really just about getting there. It's not quite like irreversible, which was irreversible, right?
Right.
We don't want to do the same thing twice here, but it's interesting to give you something to do. And I kind of, in a video game way that doesn't have that much to do with time or anything, I just like that you kind of have to dodge the same bullets twice because they come up through the spikes and they go.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just died a zillion times on my way back out, and I didn't care.
that works too. That's, we don't keep a death count in this game, but if we did, for a lot of people, it would be very high.
Here we learn this cool new dynamic of a thing that can imbue you with immunity, because if monsters and clouds and platforms can be immune, why not us?
One extra thing that I do here, in part it just is to make the level simpler and neater, but in part it's to seed the idea of rewinding, right? Because there are deliberately 2 times here when you can't get back. So one is you drop down to the left to throw the switch, you throw the switch, and then you're like, oh, I try to jump back up, but you have to rewind to get back, right?
And luckily it's a sparkly switch.
Sparkly switch. Sparkly other platform, so they don't go backwards. And you see the monsters go back, which is like a taste of what the level is setting up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then again, later, you're like, what does that platform do? You ride platforms in the game, but this one, it's got this little white sparkles or foam or something. You haven't seen that, right? So you have no idea what it does. But then maybe at this point, people start to figure it out, right?
Right. I think I didn't recognize that this was a new type of thing with a new type of sparkle until I stood on it and had that nice effect of the particles glomming onto me, and now me also flashing golden green.
So this is one of the first areas I reworked, and I really went crazy with the parallax. There's a lot of objects back there. My favorite is a really small plant that kind of you can only see with one at one particular position back there between the trees. Parallax is in and out of view, and in fact, sometimes there's a particle covering it up. There just was.
Bueno, nos estamos acercando al fin de este episodio. Vaya, eso fue muy raro. Oh, la princesa. ¿Qué princesa? Estar en otro castillo. Me encanta que esto no es un castillo. O mejor dicho, es un castillo dentro de la lógica de este nivel donde se vuelve cada vez más extravagante y opresiva la flora. Destrabamos 2 niveles. Gran progreso. Great success. Bien. Cerró perfecto este capítulo. 1 hora, medio mundo. Volvimos al mapa general. Eso que se ve ahí abajo en el baño siempre estuvo ahí. Ah, es el arte, ok. Sí. Bien. ¿Qué aprendimos en este capítulo? Aprendimos algo sobre expresionismo aplicado al sound design. Eso me gustó mucho. Y estuvimos viendo el nivel de obsesión que tiene este señor al momento de diseñar un nivel. No lo comenté, pero de esos últimos audios que escuchamos también me gustó mucho, y nunca lo había pensado así, el concepto de diseño top-down o bottom-up. Que si lo entendí correctamente, lo que se refiere es top-down es vengo con la idea y acomodo el mundo a eso. Bottom-up es vengo con el mundo y veo qué ideas surgen de eso. Hablando mal y pronto, eso es lo que yo saqué. Muy interesante, como siempre. Creo que ya vamos encontrando un ritmo. En los primeros capítulos de esta serie siento que fueron un poco accidentados porque yo mismo no sabía con qué me iba a encontrar. Además de todos los problemitas de audio, que ojalá se empiecen a ir puliendo un poco con el tiempo. Nada más. Nos vemos en el próximo episodio. Si lo estás disfrutando o estás aprendiendo, déjame un like, un comentario, un follow, esas cositas. Mi nombre es Nachito y nos vemos en el próximo episodio.